Jared Lovelace is a candidate for the Republican primary in the 10th Congressional District. Joins us today. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Let's start today, just a little bit of background so people can learn about you.
Okay.
So tell us your background, where you're from, educational background, and professional background.
Sure. So my family's been in Fayette County for 7 generations. I currently live in LaGrange, Texas, with my wife and our 3 kids. We have a 5-year-old boy, a 3-year-old boy, and a 1-year-old girl. We are very much in that busy hustle and bustle phase of life with small kids, but we love it. We love having children. And I grew up in Tomball, Texas. We now live on the family farm in LaGrange where my mom was raised. And after I finished high school in Tomball, I moved away to go attend college at Baylor University, where I studied electrical engineering for a year. And then after I studied at Baylor, I went to Germany actually for 2 years to serve as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I lived in Germany for 2 years, learned German. That's where I met my wife. She was a missionary as well. And after I finished up my time in Germany, I transferred to Brigham Young University in Utah, where I studied Arabic. And that's where my wife and I began our family. We got married, had our first child in Utah. And then after I finished my education, I commissioned as an infantry officer in the U.S. Army, where I served predominantly in Alaska. I spent 3 years up in Alaska, leading infantry troops, riflemen in simulated combat operations in the Arctic. And that was a phenomenal experience for a lot of reasons. It was very different kind of cold than I'm used to down here in Texas, right? But really had an amazing time. The best part of being an infantry officer was having 42 young soldiers who were fresh out of high school, and you were learning just basic life skills. And I felt like the most rewarding part of my job was being kind of a life coach for these young men and women who signed up to serve their country, especially in such a harsh environment, right? While I was in the Army, I promoted to captain, and I finished an MBA as well, where I studied online. I did an MBA online through Southern Utah University, and I got into entrepreneurial finance and really loved Silicon Valley startups. So I took a crack at a couple startups myself. The first one is a military clothing brand. Didn't take off, but I learned a lot of lessons. The second one was a travel company designed to be an app, kind of like Airbnb. It was a super fun project to work on, but it also didn't end up, it ended up failing. And so we're definitely not rich. We definitely don't have millions of dollars. We have a rich treasury of business lessons learned, both from the MBA and also from the practical experience through about 36 months of working on startups at different times. After I got out of the Army last May, I was still working on that second company, and we stayed with it until October of this year, of 2023. When we decided to shut it down, Courtney and I were kind of left with what's next. What do we do? As many entrepreneurs, I'm sure many entrepreneurs listening to this, have had similar experiences. But one thing that was very important to me as I was preparing to get out of the military is, as a commissioned officer, I wasn't allowed to have a political opinion. I wasn't allowed to express my political views. Some officers don't even vote because we're charged with being apolitical publicly, right? And I knew after what I was seeing during the COVID-19 pandemic and watching the federal government seize power from individuals and step on individual rights, watch the national debt go up and up and up. I knew that when I got out of the Army, I wanted to be politically involved. I didn't have any idea that I was going to be running for Congress at this phase of my life. I thought it would be much later if I ever did it. So we got involved at the community level, at the county level, and we realized that there was a lot of frustrations there. Nobody was going to run, and so we, being kind of the bold risk takers that my wife and I are, we decided to throw our hat in the ring. And since then, I've largely only worked on this campaign full time because I have the marketing skills, the business operations skills, the finance skills to kind of do most of that on my own, graphic design skills. But I have done some consulting on the side for small businesses down in Fayette County, just marketing, graphic design type of work. But we're living off of our savings right now, and we've thrown everything at this race because we really believe in it. This isn't a setup for a future race. This is like here and now. We're playing to win, and that's why we're here.
So the message, You are running against an incumbent who has been there for a long time. What's the message that you have that would cause them to turn to you?
Absolutely. So after 20 years, I ask people, what results have you gotten? Our representatives work for the people. It's not the other way around. And so a big part of my message is that a representative needs to represent you, not other entities such as PACs or lobbyists. They need to represent voters. Campaign finance laws are set up in such a way that too often our elected officials are more incentivized to align with PACs and lobbyists who aren't necessarily voters in the district and ignore the grassroots voters who come to town halls, who come to candidate forums. And that's not the way that representation should be. Some of the things that I'm passionate about are one, the border, obviously. It's worse than it's ever been, but the border is also not a new issue. This has been an issue for a long time, and we need to hold our congressmen, our elected officials accountable for the failures that we're seeing today. Whether or not it's their fault that the administration came in and changed things, that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, in the Army, I was evaluated off of getting results, okay? And it doesn't matter how hard I tried or how much I talked about something. If I didn't get results, I didn't get evaluated right, or I didn't get a good evaluation. In the business world, executives are evaluated based on all kinds of different metrics, but profitability is one of them. After 20 years in raising the national debt by $26 trillion, today it's at $34 trillion, that just doesn't work. In the business world, that executive wouldn't have made it past year 3. And so we have got to figure out a way to align the incentives of our elected officials with that of the people, not with outside entities. And that's truly the message, is I want to be an example of a good representative that votes for the people and not for institutions. A couple of promises that I'm making in order to prove that to you, the people, is one, I'm not going to serve longer than 4 terms, because I know that if I go into D.C. on day one as a freshman congressman, I'm going to have the expectation of longevity. And by having that expectation, I'm going to show up and have to play by, what we call the establishment's rules, right? And I'm going to be institutionalized into the PACs and the lobbyists and the party elites and visiting with mega donors, not voters, right? And I don't want that to happen. So I have no expectation of longevity. I want to lead by example, like I was taught in the Army, lead from the front like I was taught in the Army, and like I proved in the Army, and promise the people, and I have 100% control over this promise. Nobody else has any control over this promise, that I'm only going to serve 4 terms, and then I'm going to walk away of my own free will and accord, because I know that there's other talented people in this district who would do an amazing job representing the people of District 10. The second promise is, when you walk into my office, the people's office in D.C. or here in College Station or in Austin, when you walk into the big room with the big fancy oak desk and the big tall computer chair, where the typical congressman sits to receive his, constituents, that's not my desk. That's your desk. The name placard on the table is going to say the people, and I'm going to get the little chair in front. And my workstation is going to be somewhere in the corner. Nothing grandiose. Just a place where I can type on the computer and do what I need to do, right? But those are 2 things that I'm going to do to promise the people and show as a visible way to myself and to remind myself that I'm accountable to you. You hire me to do that job, and you have the power to remove me. And so I think that is the message in its essence. That is what we're lacking right now, is I think that genuine, authentic, grassroots level representation.
For better or worse, the Washington you describe, and I think the Washington that exists for many people, is that it would take almost 3 or 4 terms to get a committee seat that you wanted, or even be able to build an alliance. What people want, no matter what, is an effective legislator. So in the reality of D.C. and inside the Beltway, what happens to you even in that first 2 terms?
Yeah. So the things that I'm saying right now, they go against the grain, and there are going to be party elites and DC elites that try to punish me for the attitude that I have, right? Because I'm committed to the people, not necessarily the powers that be, right? And I'm trying to prove that the people are the greatest power, So how much will I be able to get done? That's a reasonable question, especially in a limited amount of time, let's say 4 terms. I think there's a couple of ways of looking at this. First off, the federal government does way more than the U.S. Constitution originally set it up to do. And so more often than not, we're legislating on issues that shouldn't be legislated on at all, or tax dollars shouldn't be spent on at all at the federal level. And so, quite frankly, I feel like more things need to be told no. Like, I need to be the no man. Like, we need to start saying no a lot more before we can start creating things and saying yes to things. And so I think that there's a pretty dramatic shift that needs to happen. And the only way to do that is by congressional districts across the country to put the right people on the ballot representing them that have the courage to go against the grain, to go against the system, and maybe not make a measurable impact in the form of we passed XYZ bills during this session, but instead we shot down XYZ bills during this session that never should have seen the light of day, okay? Congress spends way too much money. We operate at a $1.44 trillion deficit. And once again, spending. Someone's got to start saying no to spending before we can start realigning how spending works, right? So I don't think that the way that I would measure my first few terms, it would be in terms of what I was able to create necessarily, but rather what change I was able to force by standing up for what we need to. I'm a young guy. I'm 30 years old. I'm not going to wait around on anybody else to fix this for me because the national debt's sky high, and I'm afraid that we're not going to have a sovereign nation in 10 or 20 years. So
the money that you're talking about, the government spending,
Yep.
sometimes it goes to projects, sometimes it goes to programs, but sometimes it just goes to people.
right.
They get money into their accounts or in their hands from the government.
Yep.
What you're saying is you're going to diminish the amount of money I'm getting. Why should I vote for you if this is your point of view?
So socialism doesn't pay off in the long run. Free handouts don't pay off in the long run. A lot of the biggest issues that we're facing in this country right now, drug epidemics, mental health crises, are because as a society, we have gotten too used to getting things easy. The government will take care of me. I don't have to work as hard. There's no pressure for me to perform or for me to create or for me to work hard and accomplish something. Free handouts, while in the short term, it's more money in my pocket. COVID-19, the pandemic relief checks that everybody got. Sure, it was great getting a nice fat check in the mail, right? But at the end of the day, that was unconstitutional. The United States federal government should not be handing out free money to people. Lower taxes, leave that money in people's pockets to begin with, and the economy will grow. We don't need to be dependent on the federal government for our livelihood. We shouldn't be dependent on the federal government for our livelihood. So that would be my response to, hey, like I might not get free money from the government or free benefits. That's where I fall on it.
If I were to look at a campaign statement for the Lovelace campaign, what would that look like? Where are you getting your donations from? Where are you getting your financing from?
It's financial report.
Great.
So the bulk of our finances came from me. We put a lot of money. We took money out of our savings. We put it in the campaign because we believe in this that much. I don't have PACs or institutional donors. Largely because I'm a nobody. Like nobody knows, at the national level, at the elite level, nobody knows who I am until now, right? And so we don't have those kinds of elite type of relationships. But I'm okay with that because part of the whole hypothesis that I'm trying to test is that the people can prove to the establishment that they're in charge, not the money, right? And until we can pass more legislation to dilute the effect that money has on our elections, we need hardworking go-getters who can run for office grassroots style and win and prove to the public that it's possible, right? And the rest of our most of our donations, I don't know exactly how many donors we have off the top of my head right now, but most of our donations have come from within the district. We have gotten donations from across the country though, because there are other people out there that believe in our message. My opponent is the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, right? And that particular role, I mean, if I get elected, I'm not going to be the chairman, right? I'm going to be a freshman congressman. Right? But at the end of the day, everybody's affected by the power that he has across the country. And so there are a lot of people across the country who are also motivated to support us because they, as conservatives, as Republicans, they don't like the direction that our long-term Republican congressmen are taking us in terms of foreign policy specifically, right? So our campaign finances are quite simple, to be frank.
Is there anything else we haven't covered today?
I think foreign policy is something that a lot of people are pretty worked up about right now. This all ties back to spending, and it ties back to the border too. My opponent is the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Until we're able to fix our own border, balance our own budget, and take care of issues at home, these are near targets. In the Army, we talk about like 25-meter targets, 100-meter targets, 300-meter targets, by order of priority and necessity. Like, you have to take care of the near targets first before you can even look down range. The border and our debt are the near targets right now. These are the things that, if left unchecked right now, will be irreversible and unfixable into the future. Until we can fix those, I am not in favor of sending any money overseas to fight foreign wars in the name of some DC elites' geopolitical chessboard or philosophy of how foreign affairs or global economics should be run. At the end of the day, we have an existential crisis on our own shores and on our own borders. And so I am totally against more money going to Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, any other countries until we can fix our own issues. And too many of our DC, our elected officials and our DC elites, in the name of national security, we have to send money to go fight this war, give money to this historically corrupt country to fight this war so that we don't get into a war with the Russians if they attack NATO soil. If we're so worried about getting into a war with Russia, maybe we need to look at whether or not NATO is actually in our best national interests. Traditionally, that's what we've always gone to, right? But is it actually beneficial anymore, or is it just traditional? The last 70 years of U.S. foreign policy has delivered a lot of failures. Vietnam, Korea, we got Afghanistan, Iraq a couple of times, Yemen, Syria, Libya, the list goes on and on and on. What have we gotten for those conflicts other than spending trillions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer dollars and thousands of American lives? We need to stop thinking about the world as far as democracy first. In the name of democracy, this very philosophical idea, we're going to go fight this war and build this nation. Let me tell you, I've led infantry soldiers, and I can tell you right now that if you're putting the fate of a nation into combat troops to build a country, to build a democracy, to hold elections, that's not the purpose that they were trained for. Okay, these are valiant young men and women who are doing the nation's business, but they are not trained to hold democracies, to build democracies. Weapons don't build democracies, right? The people within that country do it. And so I think we need a very strong shift, and we need to rethink our foreign policy very seriously and think about what's prudent and what's achievable with clear objectives and not so philosophical all the time.
Here we are in the middle of February. The presumptive nominee at the top of the ticket would be Donald Trump.
Right.
Tell me how you align yourself with some of his beliefs.
Yeah, I support Donald Trump. I think his foreign policy is in line. There's always everybody is different, and every elected official has a slightly different philosophy from the next person. So there are some ways of how Trump does business that I don't necessarily agree with. It's not my personal brand, right? But overall, I've supported Trump in his bid for the president since when I launched my campaign in October. So I will support him to the best I can, but I also will hold him accountable. That's the reason that we have 3 separate branches of government set up by the U.S. Constitution, is so that we can hold each other accountable, right? So my loyalty to Trump, in that I support him for this presidency and I believe in him and his policies, does not necessarily mean that Trump is God. That's not how I feel. God is God. And I'm going to do my best to uphold the U.S. Constitution and make sure that Congress abides by its precepts and what it mandated Congress specifically to do.
They have a website that the folks could go to if they'd like some more information.
Yes, sir. Jared2024.com. That's Jared 2024.com. You can go there. You can read more about my platform. It's got my contact info. It's got a place where you can donate if you feel so inclined. The biggest thing that we need, if you align with what I'm saying right now, the biggest thing that we need is word of mouth, sharing the message with your friends and your family, and going to vote early so that then you can go back and bring your friends to go vote on March 5th. Early voting starts February 20th. The word of mouth is the biggest thing that you can do. We'll always take a couple of bucks. We don't need a ton of money to win. Okay, we have a very steep. My opponent has a very large war chest, and he's going to spend a lot of money. But the message is more important than the money. Okay, but that's truly what we need. If you can go to jared2024.com, you can find ways to get in contact and help out. But that would be what you could do.
Jared Lovelace, he's a candidate for District 10, U.S. Congress. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.